80 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh man, don't tell me that. I'll use the whole thing.
Perfect, thank you. Okay.
Hello, I'm Tim Rogers. You are watching Kotaku.com, and this is the Timprovisation. Today, I'm going to be talking about. See, this actually feels. This feels really, actually. I don't know. The last two times I did this, it was very improvised. I didn't know what I was going to do at all the first time. The second time, I knew that I was going to be describing box art. This third time, I literally have no idea. However, much like the first time, the spontaneity is still sort of here because I just remembered I do still have my toothbrush in my pocket because I brushed my teeth before coming into the studio. And I did not want to go back and put the toothbrush on my desk where it belongs. So there's still a little bit of that spontaneity. Right before I came in here, I played the demo of Dragon Quest XI on the Nintendo Switch for about 10 minutes. And I experienced the Japanese voices and the orchestral music. And I saw fit to tweet about it. And I went over to Nintendo's Twitter account. And the top tweet to find the Dragon Quest tweet and retweet it and go, I got the demo, it's good, I'm excited, I'm gonna play all the way through this game for the fourth time. And then I saw at the top of their Twitter account was a tweet about Link's Awakening, which is being re-released on the Nintendo Switch on September 20th. Today is August 21st, 2019. I'm recording this on August 21st, 2019, and no joke, I literally bought Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Game Boy exactly 26 years ago today. 26 years ago to the day, I bought that game at the King of Prussia Mall in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, while me and my family were visiting my mom's family in Pottstown, Pennsylvania from our home in Fort Meade, Maryland. We were living in Fort Meade, Maryland at that time. My aunt gave me $20 for my birthday, which is June 7th. I took it and I had a couple extra dollars and I bought The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening at King of Prussia Mall at the Electronics Boutique before they were EB Games, which is before they were GameStop. I had my Game Boy in the van. My dad had a 1990 Dodge Ram conversion van. I played Link's Awakening for the whole drive back from King of Prussia to Pottstown, which is, I don't know how far that is. Is King of Prussia closer to Philadelphia than Pottstown or farther? I think it's closer. I think it was like a half an hour. It took like a half an hour or maybe 45 minutes to get back to my aunt's house in Pottstown. My mom's sisters all lived in a house, which is some wild, kooky, Americana sort of thing. During that drive from King of Prussia to Pottstown, I played Link's Awakening. I had my Game Boy with me. I was 14 years old. I just turned 14 2 months before that. And I had played Super Mario Land on the way to the mall because that was the only game I had on Game Boy. And I was very excited about Zelda. I read about it in Nintendo Power. I'd stared at they had a map of the first dungeon. I had stared at it. I blasted through the first side quest zone and the first dungeon during that 30-minute ride. And then when we got back to Pottstown, my aunt was like, oh, what did you get? Is that a new game? And I was like, yeah, it's a new game. And my mom was like, where'd you get the money to get that? And then my mom got real mad and she made a really big show out of giving my aunt $20. And then she yelled at me for 2 weeks about accepting money from my aunt. However, I got to play Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. For the rest of that trip, I bonkered through that whole game. So I guess what I'm saying is today on the Timprovisation, we are doing the Kotaku.com pre-review of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch, which is available on September 20th, 2019. I don't need to play The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch in order to review it, because I've already played it. I've played through The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening 8 times in my life. Now, I'm not the biggest Zelda guy. However, I'm sure that given enough time, I could recall the layout of every screen of the overworld and dungeon from The Legend of Zelda 1, 2, 3, and Link's Awakening. So for today's exercise, we're going to be doing the Kotaku.com Tim Rogers vertical slice of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Because I maintain to this day that the opening segment of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, which is the best Zelda game, by the way, is the perfect segment of video game. It alone serves as all you need to know if you're looking to get into game design or level design or just thinking critically about video games. Everything that anyone has ever loved about any Zelda game happens in the first 30 minutes of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. And it happens in the most perfect, purest form. I'm going to try to recite exactly what happens in the first 30 minutes of that game, and hopefully this won't take 30 minutes. Hopefully this will take about 60 minutes, if you know what I mean. The game starts, we see a quick cutscene that shows Link's face, and he's holding onto a rope, and there's some flashes of lightning, and then we see a lightning bolt strike a little boat that's, we assume Link is on the boat. There's an establishing shot of the boat. We assume the boat goes down, there's a, sinks. The next thing we see a cut to an island shore where a girl is walking in profile to the right with a mountain range behind her and a sky above the mountains. She walks slowly to the right as though she's just having a stroll and enjoying a walk on the beach, which is an activity I recommend if you've never tried it. And then she stops, a dramatic pause, and then she starts walking again, more hurriedly. This immediately impresses even the most amateur of game approaching players with the concept being able to visually read changes in velocity, a skill helpful for playing Zelda and any top-down arcade-style Japanese vintage shooting game. Maybe this is a little bit too specific. I'll try to. So she moves to the right, and we see a boy lying, presumably dead, on the beach. It's Link. It's our favorite guy. So she runs up to Link, and as she is about to dramatically kneel beside him, the camera tilts up, and we see this majestic mountain. And the camera travels all the way up to the height of the mountain, and we see an egg at the top. Just a big, weird-looking egg. For a Nintendo fan in the early 1990s, this egg would have struck us as looking like Yoshi's egg from Super Mario World, because it's a big spotted egg. Very strikingly spotted, polka-dotted egg. We didn't have Smash Bros back then. We couldn't even, give me $1 million, I couldn't have predicted Smash Bros back then. I would not have believed you if you'd told me Smash Bros would be a thing that existed. And I call it Smash Bros because I'm 40 years old. I was already in college when it came out on the N64. So this was just a big feeling, this Yoshi egg on top of this mountain. And it's not a Yoshi egg. It belongs to a spiritual celestial being called the Wind Fish. We'll learn about it later. And then we see the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening big title splash on the screen. Legend of Zelda music plays triumphantly. We start the game after we've gotten our fill of the music, which might take a while because gotta love that music. Name our save file, and the game starts with Link awakening in bed. Link's Awakening. The title has already delivered on its promise. If you've played Zelda A Link to the Past, this is a familiar scene as well. Link asleep as the light fades in and we see our first picture of the game. Now, by his bedside is a young girl who wakes him up and says, "Oh, you're awake," or he wakes himself up. She says, "Oh, you're awake." You get out of bed. There's a man sitting at a table, and he looks just like Mario. So even a person with passing interest in Nintendo would be able to tell you that this guy looks like Mario. And his name is Talon, and the girl's name is Marin. It's in Japanese, they're Tarin and Marin. And Marin is one letter off of Mario, which is Mario. Except that's the girl. The girl has the name that references Mario. Interesting joke, to say the least. Talon, the man, gives you a shield. And he also knows your name. He says, "Hey, Link," if you named your character Link, "I found your shield." And then there's a little funny follow-up line where he goes, "How did I know your name?" "Well, it's engraved on the back of your shield." And I thought that was funny when I was 14 years old. That's like the humor that I appreciated. Marin tells you that you should go back to the beach because your boat wrecked on the beach and maybe some of your stuff is there. This is a good way to get me as a 14-year-old excited about playing a video game, is to tell me that there's some of my stuff that I gotta go get, because I was very, very protective of my stuff. And I still am, and you should be too. You exit the house, and as you exit the house, first of all, I remember the house is very striking. There's a house and it's surrounded by grass, and then there's a fence around the house. And then on the upper right corner of the house is a tree, just a big Zelda Link's Awakening looking kind of bulky oak tree. And I just remember that being very visually striking. There's the meadow around it. And remember, this was on the original Game Boy, and I was playing it on the original big brick, gray, magenta, green and black, or green and dark green screen, like looking through pea soup. And I had my Handy Boy, which was what they called this sinister apparatus that you could strap to your Game Boy that had fold-out speakers and a magnifier and a light. I think nowadays, if you ask someone what they think a Handy Boy is, I think 9 out of 10 people are going to implore you to excuse them. So I had that, and like illuminating my Game Boy screen as we're driving back to Pottstown, Pennsylvania on the evening of August 21st, 1993. It's illuminating the screen, so the contrasts between the darker green and the lighter green, the game really has to make a lot of very difficult decisions on what gets shaded, what shade of what on the screen, how many dots go into whichever tile. And each screen is made up out of 10 by 10 tiles. I know that it's 10 by 10 because in a dungeon you usually get 8 by 8. We'll get to that in a minute. This first screen impresses you with all these different shades because you can very clearly tell that there's the roof of a house, there's a fence, there's grass, and then beyond the fence there's a meadow and there's a tree, and the tree is very dark. Most important part here is that leading down from the house is a road, and it's very clearly a footpath. And this road is like super important. It's extremely important because you can tell it's a road because it's a different shade from everything else, and there are little white dots in the middle of it, almost like a road that cars would drive down. Now, if you follow this road to the left, you go to the next screen, and Zelda Link's Awakening proceeds screen by screen. You go to the next screen, and on the next screen there's a house with a smaller house next to it, and a chain chomp from Super Mario Bros. 3 or Super Mario World chained up outside, and a dog playing in the backyard. So we have this visually striking layout. Just immediately, confrontationally, the game is looking a little bit weird, and that's cool. It looks alive and lively. We can continue off the road if we want. We can go up, and that takes us to the fishing pond. Though, for the moment, let's presume, let's role play this 14-year-old who's playing the game in a van, hurtling toward Pottstown, Pennsylvania, home of the Sara Lee Pie Pan Company. Let's just assume we're gonna be following this road. So if we keep following the road, we follow it one more screen to the left, and we see a hill, like a cliff side, at the top of which are 3 little bushes. And then under it, there's a well. And we know, if we've played a Zelda before, that we can use if we've played Zelda 3, A Link to the Past, we know that we can use our sword to chop down the bushes, and that we can then jump down into that well, and there's probably something in there. We know there's probably something in there just by looking at it. And even the casual player might think there's probably something in there, and if someone wanders off the path, they might find they can't interact with the bush, and then they just decide to continue down the road, which is so kindly gesturing them downward. Now you go down the path and you see another striking image, an extremely striking image, which occurs to me as an archetype of RPG townspeople design, is 2 boys playing catch. They're throwing a ball and it is crossing the road. It is just jumping back and forth over the road. And if you are following the road studiously, as I was at age 14, you will walk down under the arc of this ball that's being thrown back and forth. And you will go off the bottom of the screen, and now you have exited the town. You will see the road continues, though. The road continues even outside of town. Now you can go to the right off the road, or you can follow the road studiously toward this little lip of a cliff that you'll fall off of if you push down against it. And then the road continues even further, and you can push down again to drop down again. And then you go down to the next screen, and you can drop down again. And here's where something interesting happens. The road ends. So you have a choice now, which is to drop off or to go down some stairs. And either one takes you to the sandy beach at the very bottom of the game's world map. The ground texture changes. It's not the grass texture anymore. It's a more spotty texture, as though you're getting close to the ocean. So if you get down to this sandy beach, there's monsters there, and you can avoid them. And you can avoid them even by stepping into the water, which I found dramatic and adventurous. And the game is encouraging you to be a little adventurous. It's encouraging you to be adventurous from the point where the road stops after you've dropped down 3 cliffs, and you have hopefully by now learned that you can drop down cliffs. So you're given the choice between going one way or another. They both lead the same way, and you can see that they both probably lead the same way. However, the game has given you the tiniest molecule of adventure at this point. Whichever way you choose, you end up on the beach, and you're going to the right, because that's the only way to go, because there's a rock wall to the left. You continue down the beach, and you can avoid enemies. You can't fight anyone yet. All you have is a shield. The shield operates differently from other Zelda games, and the game is giving you an opportunity to learn that, because if you press the button to hold the shield out, you can block the rocks that are being spit at you at very irregular intervals. Now, you don't have to do this. There's no situation where you have to until you get to the screen right before you get the sword. You have to push the sea urchin with the shield. That's the only way to solve the get the sword moment of the game. Now, once you push him out of the way, you go down to get the sword. An owl flies out of nowhere to tell you, oh, you're here to wake up the windfish. The windfish, you can't leave this island until the windfish wakes up. In order to wake him up, you have to do these tasks for me. So he's just an owl of exposition. He just arrives to basically explain the story to you. And he tells you should go to the north, to the forest. Every Zelda game after this had a little side quest before you get the sword, and sometimes that side quest is painfully long. Majora's Mask has definitely the longest, most excruciating wait between the start of the game and getting the sword, as though it's trying to weed you out. This game, Link's Awakening, has this perfect molecular example of the sword is very easy to get in a way that teaches you several things about the game and hopefully imparts a sense of adventure upon you. Now, you get the sword within 5 minutes of starting the game. So we're now 5 minutes in. You have the sword, you can go up, you can go left, or you can go right. Now, if you go right, there's a rock wall above you, and you can continue pretty far, and you'll see a cave, like a little suspicious entrance. I'm really sweating. I'm sweating like I was when I was 14 years old in that goddamn van, because my dad never wanted to turn on the air conditioning. So now I live in New York, and there's no air conditioning in the subway like 45% of the time. And there's a very suspicious looking rock wall that looks like that it could break. And you know, if you've played Zelda, that you need bombs to get in there. However, let's presume the player doesn't know they need bombs. You can go around that wall and you can chop down some trees with some bushes with your sword. And then if you go left from there, there's a house where an alligator. There's an alligator inside the house who has bananas. And you can bring him dog food later. This is getting a little bit too specific. Now, if you just go left from where you got the sword and you backtrack enough, you can't follow the road on the way back, because the road stops and drops off at each cliff. So rather than use the road, you're now required to possess a sense of adventure on your way back to the village. And there's nowhere else you can go. If you go all the way to the right and up, I believe there's some rocks that gate you from getting out, and you can't pick up the rocks, you can't interact with them in any way. So to get further east of this sequestered starting zone that they quarantine you in, you need to get something that allows you to lift the rocks, and you get that in the second dungeons. Really, it's the first 2 dungeons that's the extremely great part of this game. I mean, the whole game is a masterpiece. When you go back to the town, you now have to figure out where this forest is, because the owl told you there's a forest. And the forest is, if you go north and east out of the town, you're just gonna run into more rocks that gate you from getting out. So the only place you can go with your sword is west and up. And then once you get through there, the owl is gonna stop and talk to you. Now, before you do that, you can use your sword for 2 things in the village. You can go to one screen east of the house you start in, and there's a bunch of bushes. Is it like an 8x8? No, it's not 8x8. That would only leave 1. I guess it's like a 6x6 grid of bushes. And if you start chopping them down, because you've probably used your sword to chop down bushes at this point, if you chop them all down, eventually you're gonna find a seashell that if you pick it up, the game says you've got a secret seashell. Collect enough of these and maybe something will happen, it tells you. The game is being very coy and humorish at this point, and you're now aware of a mystery, at least for the moment. Now, if you go back to where that well is and you chop down those 3 bushes all the way on the west side of town, you can drop down into the well and get a heart piece. And the game tells you that you need 4 heart pieces to give yourself 1 extra heart container. If you go up, you find the entrance to the forest. The owl stops and tells you this is the forest. There's a key somewhere in the forest. He tells you there's a key. Now, you then enter the forest, and on the very first screen, there's 2 of these goblins. They're called moblins. And you can fight them, you can engage them, or you can run away. And if you go up or right, so remember, every screen it's 1 screen at a time. And I remember this screen, and just so you know, the last time I played this game was 6 years ago, okay? 11 years ago, when I was working at Grasshopper Manufacture in Tokyo, Japan, and Electronic Arts was telling us to work on a vertical slice for our games. I searched my memory banks for a game that had a good vertical slice, and I must have replayed and talked about the beginning of Zelda Link's Awakening like 50 times at that point. So I could give a full lecture about it. Maybe that's what I'm doing right now. Let's not call this a lecture, because that's There's a little island, I remember, of trees in the middle of this this like 2x2 screen block in the forest. And since the game only flicks from screen to screen as you go up, it scrolls per screen as you move. If you go around this little island of trees, the game is like subliminally informing you that there's continuity to the world. There's continuity to the geography. And I think that's beautiful. Oh, if you go up from the island in the middle, there's a raccoon. And if you talk to him, he says that his nose is sensitive. And then if you go up, he tells you you're gonna get lost and you can't go up from that screen. So you know that you have to do something to this raccoon's sensitive nose, or at least you intuit this. You go into this cave that's in this log to the east. So it's like easy to see that it's a log with a cave in it because they wanted it to look right on a Game Boy. There are some blocks that you can push and some crystals you can smash with your sword. And if you smash the crystals and you push the blocks, there's a treasure chest. And you can see the treasure chest, and immediately, even if you don't know Zelda, you know treasure chests have money in them. You can open this treasure chest, and it has money in it. It has 20 rupees, 50 rupees. It has a whole bunch of rupees in it, and you've collected a couple at this point in the game. The game has now reinforced your curiosity, if you were so curious. If you don't get the treasure, that's okay. You can just continue through this room. And I'm not sure, though I know that this next room requires you to fight, because there's enemies there's like little slimes that are stuck in this little kink in the tunnel. God, I'm really sweating. So I don't know if it's the first screen where you have to fight, though you do have to fight these guys to get through them, or you can take damage and try to just brute force your way through if you're a complete numbskull. So you fight these guys and you get through, and now you're in another room where you can clearly see a heart container. Except try as you might, you won't be able to get it because there's some skulls in the way. So if you exit down from that room, you come out into the forest again, there's a mushroom. So you get this mushroom. I'd already read the strategy guide in Nintendo Power before I played the game for the first time, so I can only imagine what a completely clueless person would be like. A completely clueless person might have traveled the whole width and breadth of the forest, and you're gonna be required to do that no matter what. So when you get the mushroom, if you go up, well, you can't go up from getting the mushroom. Can't remember. God darn it. Well, I know that anyway, you get yourself out into the forest, and if you get up and to the upper right out of the forest, you come out and there's a pit. There's like a bunch of black holes. And again, on the Game Boy screen, nothing was so visible as just like fully filled in pixels. This is like a black donut surrounding a heart container. So you know there's something good there, and you know that they wouldn't have something there that you can get, and you've already gotten one of, unless it was possible to get this one as well. So you now know that you're gonna be able to jump over those pits. Well, you know you're gonna be able to get across those pits. You don't know you're gonna be able to jump over them yet. So you see that, and then you can also see there's a path leading up from where the heart is. That's gonna be very important later too, because you're trying to make these mental connections and remember where the places are that you can't go now, so that when you can go there later, you do go there. And if you had explored a little bit on the beach earlier before going back to town, you would have seen a pit you can not get through as well, but you can go around that one. So you're starting to think that maybe in the beginning you were convinced that the pits are optional, or the pits are just obstacles, and now you're realizing that they're obstacles that can be traversed, and you can find some shortcut. You can even find an item that's going to let you surpass them in the name of getting between two places you've already been faster, or they might get you to places that you've never been for the first time. If you continue down the road, there's another road. You follow this road down and to the right, and there's this really creepy looking swamp hut. And it's very striking, and you can't get any further east than this. You're a little bit north of the most northeast part of the town, except you're blocked from getting there. So if you go into this hut, there's a witch who wants a mushroom. And if you have the mushroom, you give her the mushroom. And then she makes this magic powder, and she tells you, be careful where you sprinkle it. And if you remember the raccoon saying he had a sensitive nose, and also when you pick up the mushroom, it says something like the mushroom has a sweet aroma. They use the word aroma to try to make you think about noses. So you have the powder, you go back to the raccoon, you sprinkle it on him, he wilds out. It turns out that it's the guy, Talon, and he says, and I remember this distinctly, he says, the last thing I can remember. He spells can as kin. I just remember seeing that weird little accented spelling. So you're now able to go north. There's a treasure. You open it. There's a key. The owl flutters down to tell you, yay, you got a key. Go to the Tail Cave. The Tail Cave is the first dungeon. From there, you can go up and to the left and out, and you're just going to encounter more pits. And then you go east, and that's like where the swamp is, and there's pits or rocks or both there as well. So either way, you can explore if you're curious. You might not be so curious. You can explore, or you can just go back to the town where you're supposed to go back down to the beach zone, the entrance, past the kids throwing the ball, and now you can go to the east along the road. You could go there before, but now you can fight the enemies, use your shield, use your sword, get to the east, go past that pit. There's a pit that you can't get over that you can fall into if you are clumsy. You go around, contend with enemies as you go the long way, and then eventually you come out one screen to the right on the Tail Cave. And the Tail Cave is just very immediately striking. This is the first dungeon, the most important action set piece in video game history. Don't quote me on that. You can tell it's very, very different. You know this is an important place, and you could have wandered here before if you'd been so curious, if the game hadn't influenced your mind with the roads and the paths and the orientation of objects. It's starting to now just really give you adventure, because when you come into the screen, you see the floor tiles are very different. They're little tiny squares. There's these three bizarre statues, and there's a door that's locked. And one of the statues has a keyhole in it. And the very first item they require you to go on a quest to get is the key. You use the key, open the door, and the whole thing shakes. The door opens up. And now you go in, and I remember distinctly a dialogue box saying, Level 1, Tail Cave. It tells you that it's level 1. So I find the Tail Cave very interesting. It's taken me a very long time to get to this. This is the only thing I really want to talk about. It's highly possible I've edited everything out of this video that I said before this. And if I have, yell at me on Twitter, and maybe I'll upload it in a separate video. Maybe I haven't edited it out, in which case it's really weird that I'm continuing to talk about this. I'm gonna wipe my face off before I start talking about this. Whew. One good thing about wearing cowboy pants is when you wipe your sweat on them, you feel like you're kind of doing what you're supposed to do with them. That's all I have to say about cowboy pants. I am just sweating buckets. August 21st, 2019. First screen of the Tail Cave has a door to the left and a door to the up. I mean the top. A door at the top and a door on the left. A door to the north, a door to the west. If we assume the compass is oriented north in Zelda games, which we should, because I asked Shigeru Miyamoto, and he told me. Shigeru Miyamoto was not the director of this game. So the Tail Cave is a perfect example of what current Zelda series director Eiji Aonuma says is the goal of a Zelda puzzle, which is to make the player feel smart. So even if the player is already smart, the player is going to, being already smart does not preclude the player from fumbling around and ham-fisting their way through the dungeon. Just as being ignorant does not preclude the player from falling into the right solution time and again. When Eiji Aonuma says that the goal of a Zelda puzzle is to make the player feel smart, not to educate them, just to make them feel smart. You're not going to become smart because of the game. You're going to become smarter at the game, at deciphering the logic of the world of the game. I'm stalling here so that I can try to remember the exact layout of the dungeon. You go up. We're going to assume we're role-playing a clueless player who has never played a Zelda game. Somehow they've gotten to the Tail Cave. We're gonna role-play a player who does everything they can with the opening geometry of the level without engaging with a single one of the game's mechanics. So, much like many first dates that I have been on, I might have just said something gross. I don't know, actually. Let me know if that was gross or weird. We're going to assume the player goes everywhere they can in the dungeon, yet does not engage with any of the mechanics, or items, or enemies, or treasure chests. We're going to assume they're just a tourist. So a true tourist in the dungeon is going to go up. Now, if you go left, the next screen to the left has a key, and the screen after that has the compass. However, we're going to assume the player goes up because there are these statues, these Tetris L block in the upper middle of the screen, and they are guiding the eye to a 2-block wide door. I once rebuilt this entire dungeon in Unreal Engine 3, so it's not like a miracle that I'm going to be able to recall pretty much everything in here. You go up this 2-block wide door, and you enter. I'm going to feel real dumb if that door is 1 block wide. I'm going to feel really dumb. In my Unreal version, it was 1 Unreal unit wide, like as wide as Marcus Phoenix. I had Marcus Phoenix in there because I recreated this dungeon in Gears of War, is what I did. So you can do it too. Just find Gears of War 1 for PC. You go up. And now when we go up, there is a U-shaped pit in the middle of the screen. And there's an enemy that we've seen if we've played Zelda Link to the Past, this enemy that you can't kill. You have to knock them into pits. You hit them, they bounce really far back, and you recoil when you hit them. We're going to, again, assume the player's not actually going to fight the enemies. And I think there's a bat or a slime or one of each in this room as well. And there's torches in the corners, and there's a button in the middle of this U-shaped pit. Now, again, our player that we're role-playing this player is not going to step on that button. However, the button is oriented to the right side. If you'll allow me to reach from one thing in this entire lecture, let's reach for the fact that the player is going to go right. Eiji Aonuma, retroactively, before he was even the director of the Zelda games, is hoping the player goes to the right. So if you go to the right, there's a room with some skeletons. Now, unbeknownst to our clueless player, if you kill the skeletons, a treasure chest appears that gives you the map of the dungeon. We're going to assume the player doesn't kill the skeletons, but there is a little human silhouette at the top of the room, and it's a one-way door that if you go through it, Link will spin around sort of like adventure style, and he'll come out into another room that has an arrow. And now, if we go through this, he now can't go back. You can't go back down through that door. Even the most clueless player who beelines for the stupidest place, does not engage with any of the mechanics, and flips through this door, is feeling like they're on an adventure. It's like, I can't go back. There's an emotion that happens right there. It's, I can't go back, I've made a commitment, what do I do? And the first thing you see when you pop out of this one-way door is to your right, there is a locked door. It's a little door, 1 block tall, and it very clearly has a keyhole in it, a large, like a comically large keyhole, because we're looking at this on a tiny green-on-green screen that is front lit by a sinister apparatus in a van, hurtling down the highway of the night. We're now almost at Aunt Sandy's house. So we can tell that that's a keyhole, and we know that we need a key, because we've used 1 key so far, but it was a special key. So we need to get another key in order to open this key door. Now, in the middle of the room, there's a dividing line of blocks. These blocks continue off the screen, and we can't go up through them. So we're going to assume that the player goes out to the left, following the line of blocks, because there's a wall to their right and a door they can't get through. They're being ushered left. So the game is subliminally ushering them to the left. You go left, you exit where the wall has stopped. And again, we're assuming that the player is really clueless, and they're just going to go back into that screen by going up above the wall and following the wall now to the east or to the right. So now they're back in the room they were just in, except they're on a different part of it. And this is the first meaningful time in the game where in order to traverse a place optimally, you are required to travel the same screen from 2 different entrances. So we've now seen this screen entered 2 different ways. And this is connecting together synapses in the player's brain. They now know that each screen might have more than 1 entrance, more than 1 traversal path, etc., etc. Very pristine, very clean, very crystalline. This is just a nice, perfect little piece of video game right here. I was going to say something else about that room. I'm a failure. Oh, so now that we've entered the same screen 2 different ways, it's important to note that this central part of the dungeon, this is the biggest room in the dungeon, the main room of the dungeon, is actually 6 connected rooms. It's 2 tall by 3 wide. So 2 tall by 3 wide. And now that we've gone in one screen, out to another screen, then back, we've now seen 2 connected screens. And when we were in that one screen that we entered just for 1 second, we can see there's an exit to the left and an exit up. And it's just a full screen width exit. So we know that there's just bonkers of stuff in this room. We know that this room is bigger than big. Now, if we go across this wall and then up, we come to a place where there's a pit, another sinister pit, and then another little bouncing enemy. And then there's, on the other side of the pit, again, if we saw that heart container earlier when we went to meet the witch, we know that we're probably going to be able to jump across pits. We're probably going to be able to get across them. And now, Zelda games have done this magic trick over and over again over the years. And this is one of the most wonderful things, is now the game has told us earlier in uncertain terms that we're probably going to be able to do something. Then it tells us we're definitely going to be able to do it, the heart container. Now it's telling us we're definitely going to be able to do it real soon, because on the other side of that pit, we see a block with a keyhole in it. So we now know that keys can unlock blocks that are put in the middle of a room. This was a very Zelda Link's Awakening thing to save screen real estate, because the rooms are only 8 by 8 tiles, because the walls account for 1 tile each. We know that we're going to be able to get over there and unlock that block. So now the player has seen 2 things that require a key, okay? Yet the player has no keys because they're refusing to do anything. If you go back down and then across that wall and you enter that big room, and if you go up from there, you see the platform that was accessible by that block, that if you could just unlock the block in that other room, you could be up there. You see this dais with 2 torches on each side of a treasure chest in the middle of this platform hovering above the room that you're in, this 2 by 3 room. And there's a pit. I remember the geometry of the pit. It's a line, and then it goes up. It does like a little divot, like under where the treasure chest is, just to make it look majestic, this little tiny level designy flourish that's like, this pit is curved around, and it was carved very deliberately to keep whatever is up here away from the prying hands of any would-be adventurers. So you now know that that's a place you gotta get. And it's the geometry of the pit and the orientation of the torches, the lanterns, all this gives you this burning need to get up there. And you now know that you need to be able to jump over that pit in order to get there, and you also need a key. So you have to set that aside though and continue your adventure, because you don't have any of the things you need. You go 1 screen to the left of where the pit is, and you can see another door that requires a goddarn key. And if you go down from there, you see a crack in the wall. And if you've played a Zelda before, you know you can bomb that. You actually don't get bombs until later. You actually can't get through that now. You have to come back into that goddarn dungeon, and I believe it's a seashell. Also in that room, there's a worm that's dancing around, and the boss is a big worm, so there's like a little tiny worm. And again, we're assuming the player is not going to kill that worm. The player might go back to where they entered the room through the one-way door and then remember, oh, I forgot, I can't go out that door. I guess I gotta go back. I gotta go back to whatever this room down here is. You break these crystals, you go down into another room. This is the room that you would have gotten to if you'd gone left from where the room with the button was. And it's all cracked. And this, I believe, is the first room in the game. No matter how you approach it, this is the first room in this dungeon where you are required to kill. Because the doors close on the top and on the right. The doors close, you are trapped in this room. You cannot get out. And this is like extremely important. You now are required to kill some bats. I think it's just a bunch of bats or slimes. Bats and slimes are both very insignificant monsters. You have to kill all of them, and then the door to your right opens, and the door to the top opens. You go back to the door to the right, and you see that very peculiar U-shaped pit. And unless you're completely hopeless, and we're assuming that our player is clueless, though not hopeless, unless you're completely hopeless, you're gonna be like,
I remember this room.
I could have gone this way when I first got here. And what you're going to do, magically, what Eiji Aonuma is in the future looking back at you through his time portal, is hoping you're going to do, is go down. And that's what you do. You go down and you're back at the start of the dungeon. And now, hopefully gifted with a little bit of curiosity, you know that you can go left. So you do. You go left. And to the left, there's a pit at the top and the bottom of a room, and then there's these enemies. And again, we're assuming the player's not engaging with enemies, even though we have just said they were required to kill. Maybe they don't kill these enemies. However, there's a tile on the ground that's very peculiar looking. It looks very different from all the other tiles. You can notice this even on that Game Boy screen, looking through your split pea barley soup or whatever it is. You know that screen, that tile's different. But there's a door, so our player just beelines through the door. And then you enter a tiny little room with nothing in it except some monsters. Are they slimes or bats? God darn, I remember everything except whether they're god darn slimes or bats. Slimes. I'm gonna say slimes. There's 4 of them. You kill 4 slimes because the door has closed. And by now, it's possible this is the first door has closed you've experienced. When you kill the enemies, a treasure chest appears. And you open the treasure chest, and it's the compass. And the compass tutorial screen tells you that the compass will make a sound if there's a key in a room. So right now, the game is subtly reminding you that you should be playing with headphones on. So, you know, my original Game Boy headphones lasted me like 15 years. just these little Sony earbuds that came with the original Nintendo Game Boy. 15 years, they were so good. One of the earbuds was red and one was blue, but this really nice, like subtle, really 80s looking red and blue. Lasted me until 2004. And when they broke, I was using them with my first iPod. One of them fell out of my ear, and the weight of it pulled the other one out, and they both fell into a toilet. So, the game is telling you you should have headphones on, that you should be listening to the sound. And if you are doing so, if you're listening to the sound, and you should be, because Zelda has great music, especially Link's Awakening, you go back to the right, because that's the only way you can go, you will hear that fabled tone, that key sound that tells you there's a key. And now you know, the game has told you in no uncertain terms that it will let you know when there is something important. And now it's letting you know, and you also might have seen that suspicious tile your first time through the room. You know you gotta do something. Twice so far, you have killed to get what you want. You know you have to kill. So now you're required to kill those two little beetly octopus things. I don't know what they are, they have like a shell. So you hit them, and if you can get them to fall into the pit, a key drops down from the sky. And now you have a key. Now you know, your brain is wired. Killing is good. This is the third, you've killed 3 times and gotten something each time. So now you go back into that room that has the U-shaped pit, and there's a beetle, and you can knock him into the pit if you want. It doesn't really do anything. Though you see that button. You step on that button, and what happens? A key appears, a treasure chest appears with a key in it. Brilliant. You go that one room to the right, the one with the one-way door, and you kill those skeletons, which require you to really get up against them and chase them up to the wall and hit them, because every time you swing your sword, they jump back. This tells you enemies have different patterns. So your brain is quickening now at this point. You kill all the monsters in that room because you love to kill at this point, or you're not playing Zelda. And a treasure chest appears that has the map in it. Oh my God, you've got the map. So you go back through that one-way door, and you have 2 keys now. We're gonna assume you go to the least substantial room first, which is the room to the right, because we're assuming this player went right first, so their mind is gonna continue trending right as they continue this dungeon, because this is, ask your local behavioral psychologist and they'll explain this to you. You're gonna go to that room to the right where there is a key hole in the door. You go in that door. Now in that room, what's in there? Oh, it's a very significant room. I was about to say it's not significant. Sorry.
I'm sorry that I was about to say that.
It's a very, very, very significant room. There is a pit to the right. And again, a dastardly pit is preventing you from progressing. And there's a door on the other side of the pit. So you know you gotta get over there. And you know you've gotta get through that door. And you know the only way to get through there is to jump. However, there's an open door up. And if you go up, you enter this weird checkerboard floor zone where there's these 3 monsters that have card suits on them. Again, you don't need to have played a Zelda game to know clubs and spades and diamonds and hearts. And if you can get all 3, you hit them with your sword and the card suit stops. If you get all 3 on the same suit, they disappear and they leave behind a treasure chest. So again, you've killed to get something. And the treasure chest has a piece of a stone tablet that you put in the stone tablet, and the stone tablet will tell you, it's optional, you don't actually need to do this. It'll tell you that you can flip monsters, spiky monsters with your shield. So now you know that. So if you see a spiky monster, you know you can flip it with your shield. And you might have already figured this out, because you might be walking around as I was. I loved the shield when I first played Link's Awakening. I loved how different it was from, in Zelda Link to the Past, it was passive. You're just always holding it like in your right hand and your sword in your left hand. In this, you have to actually press the button to use it. And it was fun to push enemies with it, which is something you couldn't ever do in Link to the Past. So I love that shield. So I was bumping everything with it. I actually never got that hint the first time I played through this dungeon. Also, because I was a lot smarter then than I am now. I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. So if you go back down and to the left, you're going back into that main 2x3 room, the big 6-block room. You can't jump yet. All you've done, all you've gotten for your key, you've spent a key, and all you god darn got was the knowledge that you still can't get where you want to go. You need to jump. So now you have 2 things that tell you you need to jump. And you have 1 key on you. Now there's a second key, and you get that second key in a treasure chest in that room right to the left of the room that you were in. There's just another key just sitting there. And the first time you just walked right past it because you were just chilling. You have seen 3 things that require keys. You have 2 keys, you've already spent 1, and you've seen another thing that requires a key. You feel good about keys. Now on that screen where There's the bombable door, there's the worm, and you kill the worm because now you love killing. And a treasure chest appears that has rupees in it. So the game is telling you, this is totally optional. The game is telling you, keep on killing. Just keep doing it. Just like it's feeding your urge. So you go up, you use your key to enter the top of this 2x3 room. You're now in the run-up to the item. Now every Zelda dungeon has an item that helps you progress through the dungeon, that is required to beat the dungeon. You need the item to finish the dungeon. And we've already seen two things that we need, that we can't do, which is jump over a pit. So right now, the anticipation in a 14-year-old in a 1990 Dodge Ram conversion van is just through the goddarn roof. So it's like, I'm gonna be able to jump. I'm gonna be able to jump in a Zelda game, is what I'm telling myself. And I'd already beaten Zelda 2 at that point. I'm like, I'm gonna be able to jump in a top-down Zelda game, dude. So I'm just so excited that I'm gonna be able to jump. So in this room, we get another one of those examples of a room that you can traverse two different ways. So we see a wall dividing the room into two parts. This is how they pack adventure into a little 8x8 screen. We see it's divided into two parts. There's a wall and there's some blocks above the wall, and then we can't get through the wall, so we have to go to the right. And on the right, there's these spark things that follow this block pattern. They're going around the blocks. These little sparks are going around the blocks. And you now have your first like purely movement-based aerobic exercise thing that's happening. You've been killing enough, now it's about movement. There are some slimes that pop up out of the ground. So you have to get around these sparks, navigate this little waltzy tango, dancy foxtrot little thing that you gotta do to get through there. You now go left, and then you're now in the zone above the wall. And we have the perfect, I'm gonna use the word molecular again, the perfect molecular example of a Zelda puzzle, where there are blocks. There's 4 blocks, because 4 is 2 pairs of 2. And they're oriented in diagonal lines, where the shortest possible line is obviously 2 dots, right? So it's 2 points. So they're in these little diagonal lines. I gotta flip it for the monitor so that I'm doing it correctly. It's like that. Yeah, they're oriented like this. So there's 2 of them, and they're 1 block apart so that they're making a little, what looks like a partial M. You don't need to be some kind of Fibonacci genius to see that there's a pattern here. There's another block to the left of them, and it's down on the lower plane. If you push it to the right, it will continue the sequence. If you push it up, it will also not continue the sequence, though it would fit in with the sequence because it's a certain sort of zigzag. You can imagine a 6th block. I find that really smart. And you can push it either way. All you have to do is push the block either up or right as a kid. I pushed it right, and then it looked like an M, and I said, Mario, is what I said. I said,
Mario.
I was so excited because I was a big boy and I loved Mario. And I'm still a big boy and I still love Mario, except now I'm wearing cowboy pants instead of sweatpants. I got cowboy pants on. So you push that block and the door opens to the left. Now you go into the door to the left and there's some spiky monsters. And there's also like another one of those stone tablets that you can put the slab in and read the hint, like they give you the hint twice. Is it in there? I don't know. Strike that, editor. I clap for myself so that I can see something to strike. Actually, now I'm not going to strike it because it's like funnier to leave it in. There's spiky enemies. You use your shield, you bump them, they flip over, and they expose their disgusting underside, which you then hit with your sword, and they immediately die. When they're dead, a staircase appears. And this was the mind blower. You go down the stairs in the upper right corner of this room. And Link now emerges on a ladder into a side-scrolling zone from a side-on perspective. Now, at age 14, my mind looked like god-darn pulled pork at this point because there were Goombas down there. Super Mario Goombas, like real ones. Again, we didn't have Smash Bros. Yet. This was explosive to see Goombas in a god-darn Zelda game. They'd been flirting with Mario imagery, now there's Goombas. So, metatextually, Nintendo is telling us at this point, Nintendo is a family. Nintendo is a universe. You're cool for liking Nintendo. They're telling us this at this point, all the way back in 1993. They were telling me in my sweatpants that it was great and it was lovely and that video games are cool. So I basically, you drop down because you can't jump, but there's a platform that you could jump onto if you could jump. And if you played a Nintendo game, you are a jump-hungry, fiend at this point because you want to jump onto that platform and then jump across. However, you can't. You have to drop down, climb up a ladder, go one screen to the left, climb up another ladder, and then you come up out into another top-down zone where it's just a long hallway. And you walk down the hallway. I recall there's a heart with wings on it, little fairy wings fluttering in a little heart. And you can't reach it because it's flying. It's a flying heart. You go one screen north, there's a goddamn treasure chest. And you open that treasure chest and you get the Roc's Feather. And it tells you feel lighter. So you equip the Roc's Feather as one of your items. You probably swap out the shield for the Roc's Feather at this point. Now you can jump over enemies. Why block them when you can jump over them? So you now have the ability to jump. And you can use that to get that heart that's flying on the next screen. Oh, the Roc's Feather's treasure chest is guarded by these like gnashing spike contraption-y things. So you can jump over those. I never jumped over them. I just, you can just like tempt them and then they snap and then as they're going, walk through them. You don't really have to. So you go through that, use the Roc Feather to get the heart, go back, and now you're in the side-scrolling zone again, where you're backtracking, except you can avoid the Goombas or you can jump on top of them. You jump across the platforms, climb the ladder, emerge back out into the room, go to the right, where you avoided all the sparks and you pushed the block before. Except now, forgot to mention this, there's a pit. There's a pit there. Of course there's a pit. Because this is what caused my brain to light up, was I'm gonna be able to jump over that pit on the way back. So they give you an obnoxious traversal zone where you are traversing with care and caution, and now on your way back, you can just simply jump over the pit and leave. And then you come out of that room, and there's this traveling spike thing that previously you could have pushed a block up to block the spike in. I'm remembering this now. And it's like now you can just jump over the little pit to the right because the spike stops up against it. So you can jump over that pit. So now your brain has really gotten used to jumping because you've gotten the heart, you've jumped over the pit, now you've jumped over another little pit to avoid a confrontation. You're loving it. So you go back to where that pit was with the squid, octopus, beetle thing, whatever that goddamn thing is. And you either knock him in the pit because you're sick, or you don't because you're nice, and you jump over the pit, use your remaining key to unlock that little block, go up to the left, pick up the treasure chest. It's the nightmare key, which you need to unlock the boss's room. You go back down and around, you go back into that room that had that little pit you couldn't jump over where you fought the card guys. You jump over that little pit, enter the room, and oh my God, there's a boss, a mini boss. It's incredible. There's a mini boss right before the boss. And the mini boss is beautiful. He's actually in the trailer for Link's Awakening for Switch. And he's pushing this screen-spanning, 8-block tall, studded, like rolling pin thing. He's this little demon with this little like anglerfish light bulb hanging off the front of his head or the back of his head. He's got fish lips and big fish eyes. He's a little fish guy. And he pushes this, he's just a very cutesy looking character. He's an adorable boss, and you've got to kill him. And he's pushing this big, screen-spanning, I remember thinking of it as a pretzel rod, because it looks like a big pretzel rod. It has all these little salt dots, these little spherical dots bumping and studding it. And also, I loved my pretzel rods. Snyder's of Hanover, Pennsylvania. Hanover, Pennsylvania. Where is Hanover, Pennsylvania? Is that? I know where Hanover, Pennsylvania is because we went to Gettysburg once, and it's near Gettysburg. Final answer. How far is that from King of Prussia? 3 hours? 4 hours? Is it really close to Pittsburgh? I'm shocked that I know less about the geography of Pennsylvania than I do about the geometry of every Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening room. You have to jump over this guy's pretzel rod and just hit him. And if the pretzel rod hits you, you're owned. You get owned real fast. So you've already jumped to get into his room, so you might as well just keep jumping. So you jump, you hit him a couple times, he dies, the door opens to the north, you go up. And I mean, you go straight up. There is what's in the next room? Oh, in the next room, there's a staircase down. And then there's also a door that uses the nightmare key. I love it. You use the nightmare key to get in this door, and then this is where you fight the boss. And the boss is Moldorm. Now, if you go down the stairs, you see like some hanging skeletons. And the skeletons will let you know this is like a penalty, like an evil dungeon zone. And then if you're fighting the Moldorm, the boss, and you get knocked off the pit, you then wind up in this side-scrolling zone that you then have to climb up the stairs to get back and start the battle over. So to beat the Moldorm, you just hit him. And you've already fought one of these if you played Link to the Past. And if you haven't, you're now so high on having this Roc Feather to jump that you just jump. You jump over him, you hit him from behind, hit him enough times, I think it's 3 times. Zelda loves threes, we're gonna say it's 3 times. And then he's dead, you go one screen north, you get the cello, okay? Yeah, I know it's the cello because when I was a kid, I always wanted to learn how to play the cello, and they wouldn't, my parents wouldn't let me play a musical instrument. So I remember seeing the cello and being like, there's a cello in the video game. And then you get transported outside the dungeon, and by now, you've tasted so much adventure at this point that you're able to just flawlessly get back to the town. Now, you can't get anywhere else. You still don't have the Power Glove bracelet. It's a bracelet in Link's Awakening. I remember being slightly disappointed because it was a glove in Link to the Past. You don't have the bracelet, so you can't get anywhere other than back to the town. You go back to the town, and while you're walking up that path with that striking image of those two little boys throwing a ball back and forth, you remember this. It's so iconic because you've been forced to walk under them twice now. No, you've been forced to walk under them 3 times now. 3 times. So you've seen them throwing that ball 3 times as you walk in and out of the town. This time, as soon as you enter, they run toward you to tell you something terrible has happened. Already, Dungeon 2, the quest has begun. This is the perfect first 30 minutes of a video game. Just absolutely perfect. It teaches the player to follow the road when they don't know what to do. It teaches them that sometimes there's places where they have to make a choice and go one way or another. It instills into them a sense of adventure. It gives them expectations based on what they can't do by showing them multiple things of different types that they can't do. It builds the anticipation for the moment when you're going to be able to do what you must be able to do in order to get where you want to go, in order to continue your quest. And it builds that anticipation so gradually until finally you're exploding with excitement when you know you're about to get what you need. It is the perfectly crafted little Swiss watch of an adventure in this little tiny video game. So when I see a YouTube comment on Kotaku.com's upload of 10 minutes of footage of Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening for the Nintendo Switch that says,
This game doesn't look like it's worth $60.
a game is worth hundreds of dollars. I learned more from replaying that game at age 28 than I learned from $400 textbook that I borrowed from somebody because I couldn't afford to buy the $400 textbook in college. I had to read the whole textbook in one day. I've done that, so take my word for it. You don't need reviews about the Switch version of Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. They have promised that it's the same game. And oh my God, it is a perfect game. Everything that happens in the game after that first dungeon continues that exact artisanal tapestry of momentum. The game does not slow down. It's always thoughtful. It's always mindful. It is a perfect video game. And next month, you're gonna be able to play it on your Nintendo Switch with beautiful 3D graphics that are just incredible looking. And some of you in the YouTube comments are saying you wish it was Wind Waker. I mean, Wind Waker's great. I could describe probably every zone of Wind Waker. I'm told we only have 10 minutes left on the memory card because I like Zelda that much. I was born stupid, however, I will not die hungry. Video games forever. Kotaku.com. How was that? All right, I can cut that into something. Though I'm not actually the hugest Zelda guy. I'm just saying this is very important. If you are the director of a university game design program and you would like me to give this lecture in person, just show your students this YouTube video or pay me like $10,000. Goodbye.